con el Sunny Low. You are my son-in-law. Oye, 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 oye.
Taparme.
Oye, 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 my son. I love you. I love you forever. You no love me. Yeah? You no love me?
Ah,
La gente vive como ojalá.
¿quién hace? Ah, Dios.
Como usted, Laurita, no cree en los trabajos que hace el papá. Mire, estoy haciendo esto con un amor, Laura. Que digamos ahí, ayer me pegué con Alejo una mojada ni la hiperputa. Porque todo el día lloviznó de ese mojabobos. O sea, moja Alejo y moja el papá. Y terminamos a las 5, fuimos y nos bañamos y no me recuerdo mamá. Pero salimos en papá. Yo quiero, yo quiero a Maizal lindo, a Maizal hermoso. Ay, yo love you, ay, me love you. I love you, my son.
Es un canal su vincular gratis pagar hay que pagar gratis te lo enseño canal escúchame te quiero tener canal YouTube ¿qué tenés?
Sí, yo quiero tener de todo lo que
es gratis
todo lo que
no puede ver rayo vas a comprar la cámara en Costco para los países con Marina Alberto eso en YouTube van a poner la por YouTube van a poner en YouTube van a poner con YouTube vamos a con latas
I love my son.
YouTube en vivo
I love my son. I love my son. Deme una mandarina y no moleste más con eso que se va a joder la nuca.
oh sí
Deme una mandarina, no ya, descanse un ratico ahorita en la casa con Juan David, hace todo eso. Mandarinas, ponga la bolsa, los cachos de la bolsa ahí. Ponga los cachos de la bolsa ahí. No se enoje que le estoy hablando bien. Mire, le faltó poner un cacho.
Toca Barcelona, que son otras dos. Son los 50. A Barcelona, ya se pasa de Dios. Horas. Acabo que trabajar a las 3.
Voy atrás a las 3.
Hasta ahora con Barcelona, a las 3.
A las 3 en punto guardamos.
Hasta ahora Barcelona.
Mire. No.
Ya.
No le estoy criticando. Le estoy hablando. No sea tan niña. Pase otra mandarina.
Oh, ya voy.
Look.
estoy en vivo, tu live. Mire.
I love my son.
Me gusta el en vivo. Me gusta esta aplicación, coño, YouTube en vivo. Like más YouTube, yo estoy teniendo una aplicación en vivo de YouTube. Juan. Mira el lantón. Ah, YouTube, estoy en YouTube.
Déjeme ver.
¿Qué?
Déjeme ver con la mano. Tiene los dedos.
Ah, eche. Gordo. Ah. Gordo.
Este pelado no se le
Ah, perdón.
Ya va, Daniel, y
No,
agarró
no,
al
no.
Cristo, agarró a Dios, le dijo a Dios que lo quisiera y Dios lo quiere demasiado. How are you? Good? I'm good too. Yes. Check out. Garden. When you need it, Jordan,
Gordon.
let me know.
No, Jordan, Gordon.
Good price for you.
Gordon se dice.
In house, outside, precio watch.
Gordon.
You have, I have other new car. 1 second. Painting, everything. Good price for you. Only for you. The other people very expensive.
Porque una fue la de los ojos rojos y otra fue la de la capa que venían caminando acá por el motel de aquí de Córdoba.
Fue el mismo muchacho.
Él nos platicó las dos, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Ok, bueno. Ok, bueno, entonces descartamos que haya sido durante la tuya. Porque tú ni estás acompañado por niños de ninguna clase.
Love my son. I love my son. blow my summer. Blow my summer. Let's go.
So I never had any exposures. You know, we are careful and we run careful. You know, we have no contact with patients. We have no contact with direct, close contacts. We have no contacts with contacts. We washed our hands every 3 seconds. We wore masks all the time because we had to wear masks. It's the government policy in the country. We're social distance. We were, I told you, we were on trains and cars and everything. One person in a row everywhere. That's why I'm so hoarse, because you just shout at everybody. When we had meals, our meals were eaten in the hotel rooms. All the restaurants were closed, so we weren't even interacting with our group. And then when we sometimes we were working and we would like when we went to the CDC. It was between meetings, so we went to the CDC cafeteria for lunch. They had a table like this and then another table like this, one person at a table, and there was one setting at each table, and you weren't allowed to sit. You had to shout at each other. And then I told you the last day last couple of days we were working on the report. So Margaret would be on that table, you'd be on one table, you on the next table, and we had to use microphones to run the meeting, but everything was distanced 2 meters apart. And it runs that way there. Any of the hospitals we went to, we go into the clean section, and we go nowhere near, there's a dirty section, and then there's also a gray zone. We go nowhere near those things. I was trying to give some other examples because I had to go right through all of this. And then because I was going out through Beijing to do the press conference, and Beijing, as you know, you'd ask Yao about people returning to work. Beijing put in place a policy. Anyone coming back from any province is automatically in a 2-week quarantine in Beijing, and that applies to us as well, unless we're in transit on the way out. And so what they said, there's a lot of negotiation about this. When I got off the train from Wuhan into Guangdong, I had a swab yesterday, and they said, we will test you. You've been in the country for 2 weeks. You're coming through Beijing, and negotiate agreement for how we manage this. And it was negative. But, it comes back to a science and evidence-based approach to what we're doing. If the evidence changes, right, and there were any reason that I was at risk, I wouldn't be wearing a mask. I wouldn't be sitting here. I'm not going to put a mask between me and you guys if you think there's any kind of risk. That doesn't make sense.
I'm still taking another question from online. Jason Gale, are you there with your question?
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Bruce. Lots of feedback, so I will push ahead. You mentioned learning more about the natural history of this disease. How do you think it typically starts and manifests?
So that's a good question. But as one speaks to people, what they remember is the fever, of course, and in 88%. Now the nice thing, China has 55,000 cases and data on every single one of them at the time of onset. And what they report is 88% say we had fever, 68% say they had a dry cough, and that's important numbers because, folks, what percent have a runny nose? Throw a guess out there. Because, you always see people going around sniffling and the rest of you worry, do they have COVID-19? 4%. It's not an upper respiratory tract infection. So, but Jason, sorry, back to your question. They report that, or they report just the couple of days before having what we call prodromal-like syndromes. They feel fatigued, they feel a myalgia, they feel unwell. It's just a general unwellness. So part of this is having a high index of suspicion if you think you've been exposed to someone, because they either present with that fever, a dry cough, or that prodromal, non-specific malaise, aches and fatigue. Does that cover it, Jason?
Actually, I wanted to ask you what's causing the pneumonia to progress to acute respiratory distress syndrome and multi-organ failure. What do we know about that?
That was interesting because a couple of places had documented the data fairly well. It's not published yet, but what it looks like, about 80% of these are, as I mentioned, mild at time of detection, about 13% severe, and about 6% in critical condition. And then if you look at the percent that progress from one to another, about 15% seem to progress from mild to severe, and then from severe to critical, because I thought it was a higher percent, but it's about 15 to 20% again, Jason. That's what those numbers look like. And then if you look at the survival rates per group, that's pretty well published, right? Extremely high in the milds, and then I'd have to pull the numbers out. But the high mortality obviously is in the severes and especially the criticals. And here you have to be careful, right? Because people say, well, what proportion of severe and critical survive? And, okay, so say it's 80% in Chinese facilities or 90%. That's not what it's going to be in other places. They're really good at managing really complicated disease on big scale right now. So I would not have a false sense of security in the numbers.
Okay, one more online. Tammy, BBC, I have.
Hello?
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I response telling Bannon that millions of people are infected and that 250,000 are in fact really dead.
We didn't quite get your question. Was that something about 250,000 really bad, or 200? Could you kindly repeat that one?
What is your response to Miles Guo telling Steve Bannon that millions are infected and 250,000 are actually dead in China?
Yeah, I think, Tammy, I've not seen whatever you just referred to. So, again, not dodging a question, but I simply don't know what I'm responding to. I heard two people, one of them said there's a million cases and 250,000 dead and being hidden in China or something like that. Yeah. I didn't go to every single place in every corner of China, but I think we have a pretty good sense of what the epidemic looks like, and I think these numbers are reflective of that. I mean, but I don't know where their information comes from. And again, this comes back, I get asked a lot of questions. Well, what about this and what about that? I've got to go with the data that we see. And anything that I told you, we tried to use multiple data points to try and observations to try and corroborate it, right? We didn't try and we heard that from someone, let's go with it. Everything. And the team, remember, I told you was on this team, CDC, NIH, Robert Koch, Japan's top institutes, et cetera. And they'll sign off on this thing. So they're pretty rigorous.
Okay, questions from the room.
You got to let Jamie ask a question. He's been
okay, all right. You
can his hand up.
Poor Jamie, hiding behind.
Am I not allowed to do that?
Thank you. Sorry, no echo on this one, hopefully. A couple of things, if I could. You mentioned that the science is evolving very fast in China. One of the things that's come out recently is that there may be an oral vaccine in preparation in China. What do you know about that? If you could also tell us about how the two treatment trials are going, and particularly the HIV combo drugs with remdesivir. And then just also in the numbers that you've come up with, Director General Tedros yesterday mentioned to us that there was it seemed to be a disparity in the mortality rate between Wuhan and the rest of China. Could you try to explain why that is? Thanks.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. First was about the question about the oral vaccine. I don't have information on that, but there were parts of the team that really dug into some of the science that was being done. So we may be able to find something on that. So apologies. In terms of the treatment trials, in terms of how they're going, of course, these are blinded trials, et cetera, right? So I remember somebody asked me, "Oh, great, you talked to Chow Bin. How is it looking for remdesivir?" It's a blinded, double-blinded trial. Well, I don't know. But what I was interested in talking to him, Jamie, was how are you doing on enrollment? What's the timeline to get to your interim numbers where you could actually look at this and the results? And they, as I say, the enrollment had slowed down. There's two different remdesivir trials, and it slowed down, but they're still enrolling. So because it's urgent. We've got to get answers to outstanding questions super fast, because if this drug saves lives, we need to know that. And so one of the conversations we had in China was, well, how do we prioritize enrollment for the trials that are the most promising? And then how do you make that decision? Because, there's corporate interests and everything else behind these. But going well. I mean, the amazing thing, remember as well, you've seen the pictures of Wuhan, and folks are in there running multiple clinical trials. And similarly on the HIV ones, there's, if I remember correctly, some groups have already released some information. But we're very careful as well. These trials are designed to get answers as quickly as they can. And if we meddle and ask the wrong questions, et cetera, we want to know, is there any way we can help you get to the answers you want faster? And clearly recruitment was one area. It's a great story, right? Less people are getting sick, but on the other hand, we may not get this answer. Your second question? Wuhan's higher mortality rate, right? Yeah. So there's a couple of things that probably contribute to that. Because one is three things would contribute to the difference that we see. The first is it happened at a different time. Wuhan started fast and early. We didn't know what we were dealing with. We were learning how to treat this. And remember, they've been through 6 different treatment guidelines, right? So some of that high mortality you're seeing is the first couple of treatment guidelines when we were learning how to do this. The second thing was just the sheer scale of the numbers, and this is specialized care. So that could have been a challenge. But the third thing, and this goes back to the point that Helen was making, that at the beginning of this outbreak, remember, people were finding severe disease, and that's why the alarm bells went off. And so we're sometimes looking at, because we are getting more mild cases now as knowledge of the disease goes up, and we're trying to get them, and people are understanding you got to isolate the mild disease as well. They can't stay home. That's what's fueling. That's the fuel that's keeping this thing going. So you have the mild cases in, and you got more sight on those, and that's broadening your denominator. But one important thing I want to highlight, folks, is I've heard it say, oh, the mortality rate's not so bad because there's actually way more mild cases. Sorry. The same number of people that were dying, still die. And if that was a problem and a concern, that is still a big problem and a concern. So we have to be careful how we interpret, and these numbers sometimes.
Okay, one more from the room. This lady here. Yes. Please say where you're from.
Yes, Isabel Saco for Spanish News Agency.
Right.
After all you have learned in China, which appears to be very impressive, how do you explain, for example, what is happening in Europe, the rapid spread of the disease in northern Italy? Is after 1 month of the declaration by WHO, they were not ready to manage a situation like this, and what are because at some moment you said that war is not really prepared for this. What did you mean by that? Did you mean by that? And if you should advise 5 steps to countries, what they have to have from the situation, what could you say about that?
Okay. So first, I want to be very careful. I have not been in any other country that's been managing this thing, and I don't want to make judgment calls. And again, there's, I really want to stick to where we've got data and what I know happened. So I don't know the circumstance of other countries, but I think there's really important lessons from it already, right? And this is happening in northern Italy, where you've got good systems, and you saw the action that they took, right? I mean, they're acting on scale to try and manage this. I don't know the details of it, so I don't want to go beyond that. But this tells you what this virus can do, and I think I keep saying, okay, well, this happens on that boat, well, this happens in Korea, or that happens there, and I keep hearing people saying, yeah, but that was because of this, or oh yeah, but that was because of this. I mean, this virus will show up. You have to think. So, in terms of the steps, number one, think the virus is going to show up tomorrow. Think Italy didn't know they were going to find that. They think it's going to be there tomorrow, right? You're in an incredibly interconnected world. There was a fantastic paper came out a couple of weeks ago, which showed the spread of this virus in China compared with, if I remember correctly, was it the 2009 flu pandemic, which was only 10 years ago. And if I remember correctly, every province with this virus had been hit in 23 days. With just 10 years ago, it took 120 days or something like that for all of the provinces. So, we're just so much more connected. So you got to think it's going to be here tomorrow. If you don't think that way, you're not going to be ready. So first thing is that mindset shift. And the thing you got to think is, if it hits us, we're going to stop it. You have to think that way. And I keep hearing, this, oh, if it hits us, we just have to accept and it's going to spread. And why? You've lost before you've started. So there's that mindset shift. The second thing is, if you're planning to be ready, you're going to need beds to isolate people. You're going to need to be able to quarantine the really close contacts, because we know 10% of those are going to get disease. So, and we know that they may not even know it at the beginning. So you've got to be able to accommodate those people. You have got to have enough ventilators for the serious cases. You have got to know how you're going to transport people to those places, right? Because you don't want to be managing this in many, many different areas. You've got to have oxygenation or ventilators I mentioned. You've got to have the lab capacity to be able to do this. China is testing tens of thousands of people every day still for this thing. So it's big time lab capacity, and it's not an X-ray. They don't do X-rays of these people in China. They CT scan them, because on a CT scan you can find disease that you can't find on X-ray. How many of our countries have got CT scanning capacity? How many people can we get through a CT scanner? Like 10 in a day? China put 200 people through a CT scanner in a day, right? I mean, they have systems to make it work. So you've got to be ready. Hopefully you'll never use that, right? But if you're ready to do that, you're going to be ready for an awful lot of things. But it's readiness and rapid response capacity. So then someone's got to know how to investigate one of these cases. So do you have 100 people who know how to fill out a case investigation form, or 1,000? Or is it going to be looking at that case form the day that they get that first case? Do you know where they're going to send that form? Do you know who's going to go talk and try and contact trace? Because that's really hard. So that's readiness for a rapid response. And but it's when you break it down, every one of those super doable, right? The other thing is, talk to your population, folks. We have to be ready as if this hits us tomorrow. So everybody, wash your hands all the time, right? Don't make a run on the masks, because you know what? Probably doesn't make a difference. Now, that may change over time, but we need them for the response. We need them for the infected areas. You got to get your gear where you need it, right? And you got to get your population. They got to know you're going to take care of them. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's a huge, big piece. So for me, that would be number 3. And the fourth thing is, talk to people who have done it. China have done it, and we're building barriers to the people who know how to do this. That's 4. I'm sure there's more.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 online, and then we'll go back to the room. We have a correspondent from New York Times. Are you on the line? What about Anne Gullen?
Hello, again. No, está muy bien así.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, someone's speaking.
Is somebody there? Hello?
New York Times.
No, es que yo le estoy poniendo la...
My question is about the antibody test. If you could talk a little bit more about when that was licensed and what the strategy is for when China is going to start testing and who they're testing.
Hi, I think that was Ann at the Times, is that right?
Covel at the Times.
So the antibody test was licensed within the I don't know exactly, because it was in the last 48 hours, and I heard it as I was leaving, actually. And then I started asking some of the virologists who were with us, okay, how do they actually validate this? You know, what your control panels versus your others, the rest. I want to know a little bit more, because that kind of tells you, well, where is it really in the process? But so I'd heard that two were licensed, and this is something I can't validate, so here I am speculating. I heard there were two. Our conversation always with China was about, okay, you need to do age-stratified seroepidemiologic surveys. I mean, China know that as well or better than I do. And what you're trying to do there is understand for each segment of your population, what do the antibody levels look like? That gives you a sense of how much virus may have been circulating there. And for some areas, this becomes really important to help you think, for example, about opening your schools. So are children all seropositive, suggesting that they played a big role in transmission and we missed it, and Helen's right, I'm wrong, and as a result, you should be more careful or take your time on opening the schools, et cetera. That would help understand that. So there's a number of ways you would use it. And, you know, I don't know how China plans. It's not something that we discussed to roll it out. But I would expect that they're going to want to look at a high-intensity transmission area like Wuhan to try and understand, okay, because that's where you're going to get the most information about the extent of it in that setting. And then you look at it in a lower-intensity transmission area. So, and the way they kind of see the country is places that have no disease, places that had sporadic cases, clusters, and community transmission. And I would anticipate, and if I got your first name right, that they would look in each one of those and try and see. But the reality is, in China, you know, as much as people envisage a highly centralized system, the provinces make a lot of decisions. The provincial CDCs make a lot of decisions about what studies they'll want to do and when. So I would imagine once this is out, there will be a lot of will start. A lot of it will be at the provincial level. But again, I'm speculating because I heard that, and I think best thing to say is Bruce said he thinks maybe there are, and then we try and get the right answer, because I've spent the last day on airplanes. So hopefully that helped.
Okay, given the feedback problems, I think we'll just take two more from the room and then everybody has the rest. Nina's been sitting here quietly, putting up with it.
Hi, Bruce. It's Nina Larson from AFP.